Why good people make weak leaders. There's a moment in life when every idealist is tested, when the world refuses to bend to their sense of what is right. That moment often feels like betrayal, like a crack in the glass of how we believe things were supposed to work. We're taught that if we're kind, others will be kind in return. That if we're honest, the truth will protect us, that justice is real and good. People win. But Machiavelli, writing in the violent chaos of Renaissance Italy, saw something very different. He wasn't trying to comfort people, he was trying to wake them up. And his first lesson is brutal. If you expect the world to reward virtue, you will be destroyed. Machiavelli calls this mistake the moralistic fallacy, the belief that because something ought to be a certain way it is. It's the assumption that people will behave honorably because we were taught they should. But this isn't how reality works. People lie. They switch sides. They act selfishly, impulsively, and justify their betrayal later, with twisted logic. And if you build your life or your kingdom on the belief that people are inherently good, you're building on sand. He had seen it with his own eyes. Italy was fractured with city-states, constantly at war, alliances breaking, overnight leaders murdered in their sleep by their most trusted advisors. In such a world, a ruler who governed by virtue alone was not noble. They were naive, and they didn't last, for Machiavelli being a good person wasn't enough to be a good ruler. In fact, it could be a fatal weakness, but he goes further. He doesn't just say that idealism is ineffective, he says that it's dangerous. A leader obsessed with being morally pure may hesitate at the wrong moment. They may refuse to punish disloyalty out of mercy. They may cling to treaties while enemies sharpen knives, and in doing so they invite ruin, not just for themselves, but for their people. Sometimes Machiavelli implies being feared is safer than being loved. Sometimes cruelty saves lives. This is the origin of his reputation as cold, ruthless, even evil. But that misses the point. Machiavelli wasn't celebrating brutality. He was describing how power actually works. He was offering a map to those willing to accept that human nature is flawed, and that survival requires more than idealism. In a world full of predators, sheep get slaughtered. If you want to lead, you'd better stop thinking like a sheep. What makes this message so powerful and so unsettling is how deeply it cuts against our cultural conditioning. In the United States, we grow up surrounded by stories of noble leaders, selfless heroes, and the moral triumph of the underdog. We cheer for Captain America, we quote Martin Luther King Jr., but Machiavelli reminds us that while these ideals inspire us, they often fail when confronted with raw power. Virtue may earn respect, but power earns survival. This doesn't mean we should abandon morality. It means we should stop confusing morality with effectiveness. A ruler's job, first and foremost, is to keep their state secure. If they can do that while being virtuous, wonderful. But if they must choose between appearing good and staying in power, Machiavelli is clear. Choose power, because the moment you fall, your virtue dies with you. He illustrates this point with chilling examples. The ruler who forgives too much out of kindness invites rebellion. The one who clings to old promises in a shifting political landscape is the first to be betrayed. The one who waits to act until everything is just and right is already too late. For Machiavelli, it's better to be prepared for human failure and be surprised by goodness than to expect virtue and be killed by treachery. This lesson isn't just for politicians. It applies to anyone trying to navigate a competitive world. Entrepreneurs, leaders, creators, even ordinary people trying to build meaningful lives. If you go through life assuming people will treat you the way you treat them, you are gambling with your well-being. If you believe loyalty is permanent or that goodness will protect you, you are setting yourself up for betrayal. But if you approach the world with clarity, if you see people as they are not, as you wish they were, then you can begin to build real strength. Not the strength of cruelty, but the strength of realism, of preparation, of quiet watchfulness. Machiavelli's first and most important lesson is this: abandon your illusions. The world is not fair. People are not always good. Loyalty can be bought. Love can fade. And kindness can be exploited. But once you accept this, you can begin to act with precision, strategy, and awareness. You can protect what matters. You can survive. And sometimes survival is the highest form of virtue we have left. The necessity of power. Why good intentions without strength lead to disaster. Power. It's a word that makes people uncomfortable. In modern culture, we're taught to associate power with corruption, control, and oppression. We admire humility, selflessness, and collaboration traits. We've been told to find good leadership, but Machiavelli dares to strip away that romanticism. He forces us to ask a brutal question. What good are your ideals if you don't have the power to protect them? This is the cold foundation of Machiavelli's second great lesson. Without power, virtue is irrelevant. It doesn't matter how noble your ideas are, how pure your heart is, or how selfless your motives might be. If you lack the strength to act on them and defend them, you will be swept aside by someone who does. Machiavelli saw this happen over and over in Renaissance Italy. Beautiful visions of justice and equality were crushed under the boots of mercenaries, warlords, and foreign armies. Well-meaning leaders were manipulated, betrayed, or overthrown. Their intentions died with them, and their people paid the price. Machiavelli had no patience for weakness disguised as morality. To him, the most urgent responsibility of any leader is not to be loved, but to survive. Because survival is what makes all other virtues possible. A dead ruler can't protect his people. A powerless governor can't defend his nation's borders. An idealist without leverage is a sitting duck. That's not leadership, that's a martyrdom nobody asked for. This idea runs directly against the grain of modern feel-good leadership literature. But it resonates at a deeper level when you consider the stakes. We may not be rulers of kingdoms, but we are rulers of our own lives. And in a world of fierce competition, economic instability, political chaos, and shifting alliances, those who cannot protect their position will lose it, whether in the boardroom or on the battlefield. Power is the currency of survival. But Machiavelli isn't arguing for power as raw domination. He's not praising cruelty for its own sake. He sees power as a shield, the tool that allows a leader to remain in control, to resist invasion, betrayal, and collapse. And more importantly, to fulfill the very responsibilities they were given. To govern wisely, to protect the people, to establish order. All of this depends on the stability that power brings. As Machiavelli writes, it is far better to have a competent, secure ruler with rough edges than a kind-hearted one who is overthrown at the first sign of trouble. He warns especially against relying on others for strength. Alliances, he says, are fragile, they are built on self-interest, and crumble when conditions change. Machiavelli advises rulers to build self-sufficient power. Power that does not depend on foreign help or mercenary armies. Mercenaries, he notes with contempt, are disloyal, cowardly, and more dangerous to hire than to fight against. Why? Because they don't fight for principle. They fight for profit. And when the profits dry up or a better offer appears, so do they. This is why Machiavelli emphasizes the need for a leader to build a citizen army. One composed of people who are invested in defending their own homes, their own cities, their own families. They will fight harder. They will stand their ground. Power rooted in the people, but trained, disciplined, and under the ruler's control, is far stronger than borrowed swords. In today's world, the lesson is clear. Don't build your future on borrowed power. Don't rely on favors, popularity, or borrowed platforms. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a creator, a political figure, or just a person trying to protect your space in a competitive world, you need to develop self-reliant strength. You need to be the one people rely on, not the one who relies on them. Because the moment you lose your power base, everything else you've built becomes vulnerable. This lesson isn't just political. It's deeply personal. Consider your own life. Have you ever trusted someone else to protect your dreams, only to find that they didn't care as much as you thought? Have you ever poured your energy into a team, a company, or a relationship, only to realize that when pressure hit, you were left exposed? That's the cost of misplaced power. Machiavelli teaches that true strength comes not from dependence, but from preparation. He speaks to the leader and to the individual who understands that the world can be beautiful, but it can also be brutal, and the ones who thrive aren't those who pray for peace and hope others will protect them. It's those who build fortresses internally and externally, who cultivate independence, who can weather storms, betrayals, invasions, and still stand. There's a strange kind of honor in that. Not the naive honor of fairy tales, but the hardened honor of a person who knows what's at stake and takes responsibility for it. Power, when earned and used wisely, isn't tyranny. It's stewardship. It's knowing that your people, your goals, your future need more than idealism. They need defense, they need stability. They need someone who doesn't flinch when things get ugly. And if that someone is you, then Machiavelli's advice still echoes today. Don't fear power, fear the absence of it. Because in the real world, the powerless don't get remembered for their virtue. They get forgotten in the aftermath, the kindness of cruelty. Why mercy without strength becomes betrayal. At first glance, the phrase, the kindness of cruelty, feels like a contradiction. How can cruelty ever be kind? Isn't that the language of tyrants, of manipulators trying to justify their brutality? But in The Prince, Machiavelli forces us to ask a much harder question. What if a refusal to be cruel leads to greater suffering? What if mercy, when poorly timed or weakly applied, becomes the very thing that dooms a people? Machiavelli's view of human nature is famously bleak. He doesn't believe most people are loyal, grateful, or restrained. In his world, people act in their own self-interest. And when the costs of rebellion are low, even the most docile citizens may turn on their rulers. So how then can order be preserved? Machiavelli answers with a hard truth through fear, not love. But he doesn't advocate for blind violence. What he offers is something far more calculated and, in his view, far more humane. He argues that cruelty, when used strategically and swiftly, can prevent greater bloodshed. A ruler who hesitates to punish criminals, traitors, or destabilizing forces out of a desire to appear merciful may earn praise at first, but they also invite chaos. Resentment festers. Enemies gather strength. Disorder spreads like a virus, and when the state finally collapses, everyone suffers. Not just the ruler, but the innocent as well. So what does kind cruelty look like in Machiavelli's terms? He gives us a comparison between two rulers. One acts decisively upon taking power. He eliminates the known threats to his reign quickly without hesitation. And all at once, it's brutal. It's clean. And then, it's over. The city stabilizes. Crime diminishes. Citizens learn the limits of rebellion. Peace is restored. The other ruler does the opposite. He pardons his enemies in a show of virtue. He hesitates to punish corrupt officials or violent factions. He wants to win hearts. But over time, those same enemies exploit his leniency. They regroup. They undermine his rule. Eventually, he's forced to crack down, but now it's too late. His cruelty comes slowly, unpredictably, and without finality. The people begin to fear him, not for his strength, but for his inconsistency. Rebellion becomes inevitable. Machiavelli's message is clear. Cruelty is only truly cruel when it is timid, scattered, or delayed. But when it is applied surgically, all at once with firm justification, it creates stability. And in that stability, there is peace. In that peace, people can thrive. It is not the absence of violence that defines mercy, but the containment of violence through decisive force. This is one of the most uncomfortable ideas in The Prince, especially for modern audiences, raised on the virtue of forgiveness, and the idea that violence only breeds more violence. And Machiavelli wouldn't disagree if cruelty becomes a habit, if rulers enjoy inflicting pain, or if violence becomes random and excessive. Then yes, that system breeds resentment and collapse. But that's not cruelty, that's sadism, and Machiavelli rejects it. What he defends is strategic discipline, necessary harshness, the kind of toughness that prevents a civil war before it starts. Translated into today's context, this lesson still applies, not in the literal use of force, but in the way we set boundaries, enforce consequences, and confront uncomfortable truths. A CEO who refuses to fire toxic employees because we're all family here may believe they're being kind, but they're hurting everyone else. A parent who never disciplines their child may feel morally upright, but they're creating an unstable, unsafe environment. And a political leader who lets dangerous actors flourish out of fear of public opinion may soon find they've handed the keys of the city to the wolves. Cruelty in Machiavelli's world isn't about being cold, it's about being clear. It's knowing that sometimes protecting the many requires offending the few. That peace isn't always won with speeches. Sometimes it's secured through decisive action. And if that action is postponed in the name of virtue, the consequences will eventually be far worse. There's something deeply sobering in this idea. We want to believe that being good is enough, that with enough patience and kindness, all conflicts can be smoothed over. But the world doesn't always work like that. History and Machiavelli remind us that sometimes the refusal to confront darkness simply gives it time to grow. And so Machiavelli urges rulers and us to recognize when cruelty is not a sin, but a shield. When firmness is not oppression, but protection. When silence and hesitation are more dangerous than a single, clear, necessary act of force. In the end, the kindness of cruelty isn't about harming others. It's about having the courage to act decisively when the stakes demand it. It's about taking responsibility not just for appearances, but for outcomes. Because true leadership isn't about being liked. It's about ensuring that your people, your mission, and your values survive the storm. The danger of complacency. Why success is the most dangerous illusion. One of the most deceptive enemies a leader will ever face isn't a rival or rebellion. It's comfort. Not the kind that soothes, but the kind that softens. The kind that whispers, "You've made it. You can relax now." In The Prince, Machiavelli delivers a warning that rings through centuries. The moment you believe your position is secure is the moment you start to lose it. This is the tragedy of complacency. After the storms of battle have passed, after the enemies have been defeated, and the people seem content, a ruler is tempted to breathe easy. But Machiavelli urges us to resist that urge. Because in his experience, the most fatal mistakes don't come in times of chaos, they come in times of calm. He had seen it firsthand in Renaissance Italy cities that fortified during war. Let their walls crumble in peace. Princes who were once ruthless defenders of order became lazy patrons of indulgence, and one by one they were overthrown. Not because they were hated, but because they stopped preparing for the next threat. Machiavelli's insight isn't just political, it's psychological. Human beings, he says, are naturally wired to believe that the current state of peace will last forever. When things are going well, We assume they will keep going well. We stop training. We stop defending. We stop questioning. And in that blind spot, the next crisis is born. He challenges us to flip that instinct. Use prosperity, not as a time to rest, but as a time to prepare. When the kingdom is secure, that's when you reinforce the walls. When the business is thriving, that's when you diversify. When life is good, that's when you save, train, and plan. Because the world changes fast, and those who aren't ready will be swept away when it does. We can see this in modern leadership too. Companies that dominate a market for decades collapse overnight because they stopped innovating. Politicians who win in landslides are blindsided in the next election because they assumed loyalty was permanent. Even in personal lives, relationships fall apart when one partner stops putting in the effort, assuming love is on autopilot. Machiavelli's advice isn't paranoid, it's pragmatic. Complacency is a luxury no one can afford, especially those in power. Because power, like peace, is not a gift, it's a responsibility. And it must be earned over and over again through vigilance, humility, and strategic foresight. So when things are quiet, don't get comfortable, get sharper. When you're winning, don't become proud, become disciplined. Because history doesn't reward those who get lazy when they're ahead. It remembers those who stayed dangerous, even when they had no reason to be. That is the true legacy of a leader who lasts. The importance of being adaptable, why rigidity is the real weakness in a changing world. There's a myth. We love to believe that once we figure life out, once we master a skill, a strategy, or a system, we can keep applying it forever. That success is a formula. That once you win, you just keep doing what worked, and the victories will keep coming. But Machiavelli knew better. In The Prince, after chapters of ruthless realism and political maneuvering, he delivers a final truth that catches many off guard. Adaptability is the most important trait a leader can have because the world doesn't sit still. It shifts, it evolves. What worked in one season will fail in the next. The same tactics that earned you victory yesterday may bring ruin tomorrow. And those who cling to the past, to a rigid style, a single strength, or a familiar method will be crushed by change. Machiavelli had seen it too often. War-hardened generals who couldn't govern in peacetime. Skilled diplomats who froze when chaos erupted. Leaders who rose with a particular era and fell when it ended. The most dangerous enemy wasn't always external, it was inflexibility. The inability to evolve. The belief that strength lies in consistency, when in fact, true strength lies in responsiveness. He argued that fortune or fortuna governs half of what we experience. Unpredictable, volatile, and often cruel. But the other half, Machiavelli said, is within our control. And the key to mastering that half is not stubbornness. It's virtu, not virtue in the moral sense, but a kind of bold adaptive strength. The ability to respond decisively to new circumstances. The willingness to change course without losing control. Think of it like this. A rigid tree snaps in the storm, but a tree that bends survives the wind. That's what Machiavelli admired most. Not the unshakable, but the unbreakable. Not those who never change, but those who know when to change and how much. In modern terms, this is as relevant as ever. Business leaders who thrived in analog markets struggle in digital landscapes unless they reinvent themselves. Politicians who mastered television flounder in the age of social media. Creators who built careers on one platform vanish when the algorithm shifts. The rules of the game are constantly being rewritten, and those who survive are not the ones who resist change, but the ones who read the signs early and evolve ahead of time. Adaptability, then, isn't about being indecisive or without principle. It's about being situationally intelligent. It's about reading the moment and matching your response to the environment, not your ego. It's knowing when to strike and when to wait, when to lead with fire and when to lead with silence. Machiavelli gives us an image of two rulers, one who applies the same tactic to every problem confident that their method is proven, and another who understands that each situation demands something different. That ruling a city during famine is not the same as ruling during peace, that handling rebellion is not the same as expanding territory. One ruler is brave but predictable. The other is strategic and unreadable, and history, Machiavelli says, belongs to the second. There's something deeply human about this lesson. We all crave certainty. We want to believe that if we work hard enough, we'll find a rhythm, a path, a process that will carry us forward forever. But life doesn't reward comfort. It demands evolution, and those who aren't willing to adapt are forced to watch others pass them by. It's a lesson that speaks to every part of life, not just politics. Relationships evolve, markets shift, health changes. Technology redefines entire industries overnight, and the people who cling to the past, to who they used to be, or how things used to work, are the ones left behind. But those who are willing to look honestly at the terrain to say what worked before may not work now. Who I was may no longer be enough for who I need to become. Those people don't just survive change. They master it. Machiavelli isn't telling us to become chameleons without values. He's telling us to become commanders of our own evolution, to know ourselves so deeply that we can shift without losing identity, to see clearly enough that we don't fight today's battles with yesterday's weapons. And so his advice to the ruler and to us is simple: never stop changing. Not because you're weak, but because the world will change with or without you. Not because you lack conviction, but because you understand that power, peace, and survival belong to those who stay fluid. Flexible and fierce adaptability in the Machiavellian sense isn't compromise, it's mastery in motion. The need for practical wisdom, seeing the world not as it should be, but as it is, in a world addicted to ideals. Machiavelli offers something far more dangerous and far more useful: reality. Not reality as we wish it were, not the polished version we post on social media, but raw, messy, unpredictable reality. And to navigate this world, Machiavelli tells us we don't need more hope, we don't need more virtue. We need practical wisdom. The Greeks called it phronesis. Aristotle described it as the highest form of intelligence, the ability to make the right decision at the right time in the real world. Not in theory, not on paper, but on the battlefield of actual life. And that's where the prince lives. Machiavelli's work is not a guide for the morally righteous. It's a survival manual for people who understand that ethics without strategy is self-destruction. Machiavelli warns us, if you approach power, leadership, or even personal relationships with only ideals and no grasp of human behavior, you will be broken. Because people don't always act in good faith. They aren't always grateful, loyal, or rational. Sometimes they love you, sometimes they use you, sometimes both. And to pretend otherwise, to demand purity in an impure world, is not noble, it's reckless. This is why Machiavelli's work remains so timeless, even 5 centuries later. He speaks to those of us who are tired of being told that intention is enough, that if you're kind, others will be kind, that if you lead with honesty, truth will always win. Those are beautiful lies, but they are lies nonetheless. And while they make us feel good, they leave us unprepared for betrayal, manipulation, and shifting power. Instead, Machiavelli offers us something harder but far more powerful. He urges us to develop discernment, to look beyond appearances, to understand the difference between performance and substance. Everyone sees what you appear to be, he writes, but few experience what you really are. That one sentence is a master key to unlocking so much of human behavior. People trust images. They fall in love with symbols. They pledge loyalty to perceptions, and a wise person learns not to be ruled by these illusions, but to understand them, and when necessary, use them. This doesn't mean abandoning all ethics. It means understanding when and how to apply them. Machiavelli's ideal leader is not an emotionless tyrant, but someone who sees the game clearly and plays it better than anyone else. Someone who knows when to fight and when to negotiate, when to forgive and when to sever, when to show strength and when to let others underestimate you. And this isn't just about ruling a state. This is about ruling yourself, your life, your choices. Because every day we're confronted with decisions that have no easy answers. Do you stay loyal to someone who's no longer loyal to you? Do you tell the truth when it may cost you your job? Do you keep sacrificing for people who only take from you? Idealism might say yes. Practical wisdom says step back, analyze, and act with clarity. Machiavelli invites us to see the world as it is. Not because he's pessimistic, but because he wants us to survive, to stop being shocked when people fail us, to stop expecting permanent loyalty in a world of shifting interests, to stop building our futures on emotional hope instead of strategic planning. This kind of thinking is uncomfortable. It challenges our cultural programming in the US. We're raised on stories of moral heroes who triumph through virtue alone, and while those stories inspire us, they don't always prepare us. What Machiavelli offers is a second kind of power, the power of insight, of quiet calculation, of knowing how people actually operate and making decisions based on that truth. That's what practical wisdom is. Not cynicism, not cruelty, but informed clarity. A willingness to step beyond fantasy and operate in reality. And for anyone trying to lead a team, a family, a company, or even just themselves, that wisdom is priceless, because life is not a morality play, it's a chessboard. And the person who wins is not the one who cries when the opponent cheats. It's the one who sees the next 5 moves before anyone else. So Machiavelli leaves us with a challenge. Don't just hope to be good. Learn to be wise. Don't just react, anticipate. Don't just live in ideals. Learn to operate in the real. That's where true power lives. And that's how in a world of uncertainty you don't just survive. You shape your own fate, life application. Seeing clearly, acting wisely. In a world that often rewards illusion over truth, one of the most powerful things you can do is learn to see people and situations as they really are, not as you wish them to be. That's the core of Machiavelli's message. It's not about becoming ruthless, it's about becoming realistic. And in today's culture of performative morality and carefully curated appearances, that realism is rare. We're told to always lead with kindness, loyalty, and honesty, and those are valuable traits. But they must be paired with discernment. Blind loyalty will leave you used. Excessive kindness will invite exploitation. Unfiltered honesty will expose you to those who don't have your best interests at heart. Machiavelli's wisdom teaches us to be strategic with our goodness. Be kind but not naive. Be trusting but not blind. Be moral, but not at the cost of your survival. In a job, a relationship, or a negotiation, ask yourself, am I being smart or just idealistic? Am I hoping people will do the right thing, or am I preparing for what they're more likely to do? Power in Machiavelli's view isn't domination, it's self-possession. It's knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to act and when to wait, when to forgive and when to walk away. The modern world is complex, but those who develop clear perception and controlled action will always rise above those who simply hope for the best. That's not cynicism, that's strength.